There was only one rule. If the radio says your name after midnight, don't answer. At the time, I thought it was just another stupid campfire story told to scare the new guy. For nights later, I realized that warning had probably saved every person who worked that tower before me. My name is Daniel. 3 summers ago, I accepted what sounded like the easiest job I'd ever had. A seasonal fire lookout in the mountains of Montana. Paid well. It included free housing. And according to the job listing, most days are quiet. I had just finished college. My savings were almost gone. And spending 3 months alone in the wilderness honestly sounded peaceful. No traffic. No social media. No people. Just me. And the forest. The ranger station sat at the base of the mountain. That's where I met my supervisor. His name was Rick. He looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in years. Deep lines covered his face, and he barely smiled. He handed me a set of keys, a flashlight, extra batteries, and an old analog radio. "This stays on 24/7, he said. I nodded. "No problem." He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. Finally, he looked directly at me. "If the radio calls your name after midnight," he paused. "Don't answer." I laughed. "You serious?" He didn't laugh back. "I've worked these mountains for 22 years. I've buried people who didn't listen." For a second, I wasn't sure if he was joking. Before I could ask another question, he turned toward his truck. "Oh, one more thing. If anyone knocks on the tower door after midnight," his voice became almost a whisper, "don't open it." Then he drove away, leaving me completely alone. The tower stood nearly 60 feet above the forest floor. It was surrounded by endless pine trees stretching farther than I could see. No phone signal, no nearby roads. The closest town was over an hour away. Inside the tower was everything I'd need. A small bed, a desk, binoculars, emergency supplies, maps, a weather station, and that old radio sitting quietly beside the window. The first day was exactly what I'd expected. Peaceful, beautiful, almost relaxing. I watched deer cross open fields. Birds circled above the trees. The wind echoed through the mountains. Felt like I'd escaped the entire world. That night, I remembered Rick's warning. It sounded ridiculous now. I looked at the silent radio, smiled to myself, and went to bed. I had no idea that before the week was over, I would be begging to leave that mountain alive. The second day passed just as quietly as the first. Every couple of hours, I'd scan the tree line through a pair of old binoculars, looking for smoke. Nothing. The forest stretched endlessly beneath me, calm and untouched. Around sunset, clouds rolled in from the west. By 9 o'clock, rain had started falling. Not a heavy storm, just enough to cover the windows with tiny drops that reflected the tower's lights back at me. I made coffee, opened a paperback novel, and tried to enjoy the silence. It didn't last. At exactly 12:14 a.m., the radio crackled. A burst of static filled the room. I looked over. The red light flickered once. Then it went silent again. I picked it up. Fire Tower 7. Nothing. Just static. I waited for another few seconds before placing it back on the desk. Probably interference, I told myself. Rain could do strange things to old equipment. I went back to my book. Less than a minute later, the radio came alive again. A different voice this time. Calm. Almost emotionless. Tower 7, report your status. I grabbed the microphone. This is Tower 7. Everything looks clear. No answer. Just static. I frowned. Hello? Silence. I checked the radio's battery connection. Everything looked normal. A few minutes later, I called the ranger station. Rick answered almost immediately. "Everything okay? I think there's something wrong with the radio. What happened?" I got 2 transmissions, but nobody answered after I replied. There was a long pause. Then Rick asked a question that caught me off guard. "What time?" I checked my watch. 12:14. Another pause. Then he sighed. "From now on, if the radio turns on after midnight, listen, but don't answer unless you hear my voice." I laughed. "You really think someone's messing with me?" "I don't think anyone's up there with you." His answer made my stomach tighten. Before I could ask what he meant, he hung up. The 3rd night, I decided to ignore it. No matter what happened, I wouldn't touch the radio. At 12:17 a.m., right on schedule, static filled the room. The speaker hissed. Then, a voice, soft, almost whispering, "Daniel." Every muscle in my body froze. I had never told anyone at the ranger station my first name. My paperwork only listed my last name. The voice came again, closer this time. "Daniel." I stared at the radio without moving. Then I remembered Rick's warning. "Don't answer." The silence that followed was somehow worse than the voice itself. A full minute passed. Nothing. I finally exhaled. Maybe I was imagining things. Then, from somewhere below the tower, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. One step, then another. Wood creaked beneath the staircase outside. Someone was climbing toward me. The footsteps stopped, right outside the tower door. I held my breath. The room was completely silent. Then, knock. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not aggressive, just patient. I stared at the door, waiting for another sound. Nothing. Then the radio crackled. Static filled the room before a familiar voice came through. "Daniel." It sounded exactly like Rick. "Open the door. It's me." I rushed toward the radio. "Rick, how did you get up here?" No answer, only static. Then the voice returned. "I'm outside." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. There was no way. The nearest road was over an hour away. Even if Rick had left the station the moment we spoke, he couldn't possibly be here already. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. I walked to the nearest window. Rain covered the glass. I wiped it away with my sleeve. At first, I saw nothing. Then a flash of lightning lit up the staircase. Someone was standing there, perfectly still, one hand resting on the railing, the other holding a flashlight pointed at the ground. I couldn't see the face, just a dark silhouette. The radio crackled again. "Don't look away." Without thinking, I looked back at the radio, only for a second. When I turned toward the window again, the staircase was empty. My heart started pounding. Where did he go? Then, a floorboard creaked. Behind me, inside the tower, I spun around. Nothing. Every door was still locked. Every window was closed. The room was empty. Or, at least it looked empty. The radio switched on by itself one last time. This time it wasn't Rick. The voice was calm, cold, almost curious. "You finally answered." Every light inside the tower went out. The room disappeared into darkness. The only thing I could hear was breathing. Not mine, someone else's. Very close, right behind me. I reached for my flashlight and switched it on. The beam shook in my hands. The room was empty. The chair, the desk, the radio, everything was exactly where it had been. Except the logbook. It was open, a page I had never seen before. At the bottom was a list of names, dozens of them. Every lookout who had worked that tower before me. Some names had dates beside them, others didn't. My name was there too, freshly written, as if someone had added it only moments earlier. I didn't pack my things. I didn't lock the tower. I ran, down every step, through the rain, all the way to my truck. I never looked back. The next morning I handed Rick the keys. I told him I quit. He didn't ask why. He simply nodded, as if he already knew. Before I left, I asked him one question. Who keeps writing the names? Rick looked toward the mountain, then quietly said, "Nobody knows. But every person who answers after midnight eventually hears their name again." I never worked another night shift. I never went back to that mountain. But sometimes, just after midnight, my phone rings. There's never a number. When I answer, no one speaks. I only hear the sound of an old radio, searching for someone. And every single time, before the line goes dead, a voice whispers my name.